Imagine being kicked out by your own brother, all because of a lie. Daniel believed his girlfriend over the one person who loved him most. In seconds, anger took over, and a home was destroyed. But what happens next will break your heart. Sit tight and let me tell you this emotional story. Like, subscribe, and share. And tell us the time and where you're watching from in the comments below. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the opulent mansion in Maitama, Abuja. The city outside was waking, the hum of engines, the echo of distant horns, the rhythmic chatter of street hawkers calling out their goods. Inside, however, the atmosphere was quiet, heavy with a different kind of noise, pride, entitlement, and the silent footsteps of a man used to servitude. Daniel Okafor stood before the tall mirror in his bedroom, adjusting his designer cufflinks. The reflection staring back was flawless, handsome, confident, and proud. Everything about him screamed success: the polished shoes, the imported suit, the gleaming wristwatch that cost more than some people earned in a year. He smiled, not at himself, but at what the world saw: Daniel, the businessman, the man who owned half of Abuja's real estate, and the heart of one of its most envied women. "David!" His voice thundered through the house. "Where's my coffee?" Downstairs, in the large, spotless kitchen, David Okafor hurriedly placed a steaming mug on a silver tray. His shirt was slightly rumpled, his palms rough from endless chores, but his face carried a peace that money couldn't buy. He moved quickly, balancing the tray as he climbed the staircase. Daniel's girlfriend, Cynthia, lounged on the bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when David entered, her painted lips curling into a smirk. "Finally," she said. "Do you move like a tortoise for fun, or is it just your nature?" David smiled politely. "Sorry, Ma. I was just—" "Don't talk back," Daniel snapped, cutting him off. "Just serve the coffee and go." David lowered his eyes and obeyed. He placed the cup gently on the bedside table. As he turned to leave, Cynthia's perfume hit his nose, expensive, heavy, and suffocating. He remembered the countless times he'd been the one to pick it up for her, waiting in line, holding her shopping bags like a servant. He stepped out quietly, but the laughter that followed, Cynthia's mocking giggle and Daniel's amused chuckle, followed him down the stairs like an echo of humiliation. Outside, the gardener greeted him cheerfully. "Good morning, Oga David." David smiled back. "Good morning, Musa." Musa was one of the few who treated him with genuine respect. Everyone else in the house, the chef, the cleaners, the security men, took their tone from Daniel. They called him Small Oga, but the title carried no honor, only pity. He sat at the back veranda, sipping water, gazing at the blue sky. For a moment, he allowed himself to drift, to remember the days when he and Daniel were inseparable. As boys in Enugu, they'd shared everything: toys, food, even dreams. Their mother had called them one soul in two bodies. But life had changed after their parents died. Daniel had inherited their father's company and wealth. David had inherited nothing but hope. Still, he was grateful. "At least I have a roof over my head," he murmured to himself. The front door swung open. Daniel stormed out, car keys jingling. "David, clean the living room before noon. I'm expecting guests tonight." "I will," David replied gently. "And make sure the wine is chilled, the good one, not that cheap nonsense you bought last time." "Yes, brother." Daniel paused, glaring at him. "And don't call me brother in front of my guests. It doesn't sound good." David's chest tightened, but he nodded. "All right, Daniel." Cynthia followed, her heels clicking on the marble. "David, wash my clothes too," she ordered. "I'll leave them by the laundry. And don't shrink my white dress this time." David wanted to tell her he hadn't shrunk anything, that the dress had been ruined by her own perfume spill, but he bit his tongue. Peace was better than pride. As they drove off in Daniel's glossy black Range Rover, The mansion felt both quiet and heavy. David inhaled deeply and got to work. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, pouring golden light across Abuja's skyline. Inside the mansion, David mopped, dusted, scrubbed, and cleaned until the marble floors shone like mirrors. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't stop. Work, he'd learned, was a kind of prayer, a way to keep his heart pure when life tried to stain it. At noon, he sat briefly to rest, opening his worn Bible. His eyes landed on a verse he had underlined long ago: "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." He smiled faintly. "I'll keep trying, Lord," he whispered. By evening, the mansion came alive again. Daniel's guests, businessmen in fine suits and loud laughter, filled the living room. The air was thick with the scent of cigars and pride. David moved quietly among them, serving drinks, his presence almost invisible. At one point, one of the men nudged Daniel playfully. "Ah, your house help looks just like you. Are you sure you didn't clone yourself?" Laughter erupted. Daniel smiled stiffly. "He's my brother," he said with forced casualness. "Just not the business type." Cynthia giggled. "He's more like our domestic manager," she added mockingly. David felt the sting, but he only smiled and kept pouring wine. Inside, his heart whispered, "One day, Daniel will see. One day he'll understand." When the guests left, the house was a mess. Glasses everywhere, crumbs on the floor, laughter still echoing in the air. Daniel slumped on the couch, half drunk, while Cynthia scrolled through her phone again. "David," Daniel said lazily, "clean this place before you sleep." "Yes, Daniel." "And cook something. Cynthia's hungry." Cynthia didn't even look up. "Make jollof rice. But don't make it too oily. You always make it too oily." David nodded and went to the kitchen. His hands were tired, but his spirit remained steady. As the rice simmered, he hummed softly, an old hymn his mother used to sing, it is well with my soul." Daniel's voice echoed faintly from the living room, laughing at some joke on TV. The contrast was sharp. Two brothers, one drenched in arrogance, the other in humility. The same blood, yet different hearts. As David finished cleaning and turned off the lights, he looked around the mansion. It was beautiful, yes, chandeliers, marble floors, expensive art, but it felt cold. A house full of things, yet empty of love. He walked to his small room at the back of the house, the one Daniel had, temporarily, assigned him years ago. It was simple: a small bed, a table, a Bible, and a dream. He knelt beside the bed, whispered a short prayer, and smiled. Maybe tomorrow will be different. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere far away, thunder grumbled, the sound of a storm forming. And though David didn't know it yet, that storm was coming straight for him, and it would change both brothers' lives forever. The next morning dawned calm over Abuja. The city was bathed in golden light, the hum of life beginning again. Hawkers shouting along was market, engines roaring, birds flitting across the clear sky. Inside Daniel's mansion, David was already awake, as always. He swept the hallway, the faint scent of air freshener filling the air. His body was tired, but his spirit remained steady, the same quiet endurance that had carried him through years of humiliation. He moved from room to room, making sure everything was spotless before his brother and Cynthia woke. The mansion was large, too large for two people, yet David knew every inch of it. Every corner carried memories, both bitter and fleetingly sweet. He still remembered the day Daniel had first invited him to live there. "You can stay with me till you find a job," Daniel had said years ago. "But don't expect me to carry you." David hadn't expected anything. Just a chance to rebuild his life. But over time, that kindness had turned into a cage, a gilded prison guarded by his brother's pride. By mid-morning, Cynthia appeared, wearing a silk robe and holding her phone to her ear. Her voice was sharp, her laughter fake. "Yes, babe, we'll be at the spa by 12, she said, pacing through the living room. "You know Daniel, he loves to spend." David greeted her with his usual soft tone. "Good morning, Ma." She ignored him, still on the call. When she finally hung up, she turned, eyes cold. "Did you iron Daniel's suits?" "Yes, Ma." "And polish his shoes?" "Yes, Ma." "They're in the closet." She crossed her arms. "Good. Because if anything goes wrong before his meeting today, it'll be on you." David nodded, swallowing the familiar bitterness. She walked past him, her perfume filling the air, sharp and overwhelming. "Oh, and wash these," she said suddenly, tossing her silk dress and undergarments onto his shoulder. "I need them ready by tomorrow." David froze. The clothes slid down his arm and hit the floor. He bent to pick them up, but paused halfway, his heart tightening. He'd done everything for her before, washed her clothes, cooked her meals, even polished her shoes, but something inside him snapped quietly this time. It wasn't anger, just a deep, weary ache that whispered, "This isn't right." He straightened up. "Ma," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." Cynthia blinked, disbelief flashing across her face. "What did you just say?" "I said I can't wash your clothes. It's not respectful. I'm Daniel's brother, not your houseboy." Her mouth fell open, then twisted into fury. "Excuse me? Are you mad? Did I hear you right?" David's voice stayed calm. "I don't mean any disrespect. But there's a limit. I can clean the house, help with things, yes, but this is wrong." Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "You dare talk back to me in my house?" David took a deep breath. "It's not your house, Ma. It's Daniel's. That did it." Her anger exploded. "You ungrateful fool!" she screamed, pointing at him. "After everything Daniel's done for you, feeding you, housing you, you think you can talk like that? I'll make sure he throws you out today." She stormed upstairs, her heels slamming against the marble. David stood still, heart pounding. He hadn't meant to cause trouble. He just couldn't keep bowing forever. He whispered a prayer under his breath. "Lord, please, let peace rule today." But peace had already left the mansion. When Daniel came home that afternoon, he was in no mood for calm. He'd just ended a stressful meeting downtown and wanted silence, but Cynthia met him at the door, tears in her eyes, her voice trembling with fury. "Baby, your brother insulted me," she cried dramatically. "He said I'm nothing, that I shouldn't order him around. He called me names." Daniel's face hardened instantly. "What?" "I told him to wash my clothes, and he said no, like I'm his servant. He disrespected me in your own house." Daniel clenched his fists. "Where is he?" "In the kitchen, pretending to be innocent." He marched there, his steps thunderous. David was washing dishes quietly when Daniel burst in. "So it's true?" Daniel shouted. "You insulted Cynthia?" David looked up, startled. "No, Daniel, please listen." "Shut up!" Daniel roared. "After everything I've done for you? I give you a roof, food, comfort, and this is how you repay me." "Daniel," she lied. Daniel's palm slammed the counter. "Enough. You've become arrogant. You think because we share blood, you can talk anyhow in my house? You're a disgrace." Cynthia appeared at the door, smirking behind her tears. "He even said this isn't my house," she added, fueling the fire. Daniel's rage boiled over. "Get out!" he shouted. David froze. "Daniel! I said get out of my house. Take your bag and leave. Please, brother. Don't call me brother." Daniel barked, his voice echoing through the marble walls. "You're nothing but a burden." He stormed to David's small room, grabbed his old travel bag, and hurled it outside. David followed helplessly, eyes glistening. "Please, Daniel, don't do this. I've nowhere to go." "Then sleep on the street," Daniel snapped. "Maybe there you'll learn respect." Cynthia folded her arms, satisfaction dancing in her eyes. "Good riddance," she whispered as the gate opened. The guards looked uncertain but obeyed Daniel's order. The heavy iron gate closed behind David with a final, cold clang. Night fell over Abuja. The streets glowed with headlights and street lamps, but David walked aimlessly, his bag slung over his shoulder, his heart heavier than the dust clinging to his shoes. He had no friends nearby, no relatives left. He tried calling an old classmate, but the number was dead. The city that had always seemed so full now felt vast and merciless. He wandered through Wuz, then Jabi, then toward Asokoro. The lights of luxury estates sparkled in the distance, symbols of a life that had rejected him. By midnight, exhaustion took over. His legs ached, his eyes burned. He found himself before a tall black gate, grand and quiet, the sign beside it reading, "Glory Estate, Private Property." He looked around. The street was empty. The night was cold. "I'll just rest here for a while," he murmured, setting his bag down by the gate. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The hum of crickets filled the night. Somewhere inside the estate, soft lights glowed from a distant mansion, unaware that just beyond its gates, destiny was waiting to wake. As sleep pulled him into silence, his last thought was not of anger, but of forgiveness. "Maybe one day," he whispered to the stars, "he'll understand." And above the quiet streets of Abuja, a gentle wind swept through the palms, carrying away the tears of a man who had lost everything, yet still refused to hate. The morning sun rose softly over Abuja, spilling golden light across the manicured lawns of Glory Estate. Birds chirped in the mango trees, and the faint hum of gardeners trimming hedges filled the air. Inside the main mansion, a sprawling white structure framed by glass and marble, Glory Nwosu sipped her coffee by the balcony. She was young, not yet 30, but already one of Abuja's most successful entrepreneurs. Her father had left her a thriving construction company, and through her intelligence and generosity, she doubled its worth. Yet despite the wealth surrounding her, Glory's mornings were always quiet. She preferred peace to luxury, purpose to fame. She often spent time journaling before work, her thoughts full of gratitude and prayer. That morning, however, something unusual caught her eye. Down by the gate, a man lay slumped beside a dusty bag, his clothes wrinkled, his face weary from sleeplessness. "Who is that?" she asked, turning to her security guard, Uche, who stood nearby. "Madam, we noticed him last night," Uche replied. "We thought he was one of those men just passing, but he slept there till morning." Glory frowned slightly. "Did anyone ask him to leave?" "No, Ma. He looked harmless. I was going to talk to him now." She paused, studying the man from afar. Something about him, the way he sat, the calmness even in his exhaustion, stirred compassion in her. "Bring him inside," she said softly. "Let's see what his story is." Moments later, David found himself standing awkwardly by the front garden, his dusty bag clutched in both hands. He looked down, embarrassed. The air smelled of roses and new beginnings, but all he felt was shame. Glory walked toward him, her expression kind but firm. "Good morning," she said. "You spent the night outside my gate. Are you all right?" David's voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry, Ma. I didn't mean to intrude. I just needed a place to rest. I'll leave now." "No," Glory said gently. "You look like you haven't eaten. Come inside, have some breakfast first." He hesitated. "Please, Ma, I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing trouble. Everyone needs help sometimes." Her words carried warmth, the kind David hadn't heard in a long time. He followed her quietly into the mansion. Inside, a maid served him a plate of hot yam and egg sauce. The aroma made his stomach twist. He hadn't eaten in nearly a day. He muttered a prayer of thanks before eating, slow and grateful. Glory watched from across the dining table. "So," she said softly, "what happened to you?" David swallowed hard, unsure where to begin. Then, slowly, he told her everything, about Daniel, the mansion, the humiliation, and how he'd ended up on the street. He didn't try to make himself a victim. He just told the truth, simply and sincerely. When he finished, Glory sat quietly for a while. Then she said, "You have a kind heart. I can hear it in your words. Not many people would still speak gently about those who hurt them." David lowered his eyes. "Anger only makes pain heavier. I'm just praying for strength." She smiled faintly. "You remind me of my father. He used to say humility is the crown of true strength." Something in her tone made David feel seen, really seen, for the first time in years. Later that day, Glory offered him a small job. "I need help at one of my construction sites in Guzape," she explained. "Nothing too difficult, mostly supervising supplies, keeping records, that sort of thing. You studied accounting, right?" David's eyes widened. "Yes, Ma. I did. How did you?" "You mentioned it when you spoke about looking for work. I remember details." He smiled for the first time that day, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thank you, Ma. I won't disappoint you." "I know you won't," Glory said. "And please, stop calling me Ma. Call me Glory." David hesitated. "That doesn't feel right." "Then call me Miss Glory," she said with a soft laugh. Over the next few weeks, David threw himself into his work. His diligence impressed everyone. He arrived early, stayed late, and treated every task, no matter how small, with care and excellence. The workers respected him. The site managers trusted him. And Glory, watching from a distance, saw something rare, a man whose humility didn't come from weakness, but from strength refined by suffering. One evening, as she reviewed reports in her office, she noticed a small handwritten note attached to one of David's files. "All records verified twice for accuracy. I prefer peace of mind over speed. David." She smiled to herself. Peace of mind over speed. It was such a simple sentence, yet it revealed his entire character. Weeks turned into months. David's savings grew. Glory, true to her generous nature, promoted him to a managerial role after seeing his honesty and leadership. He began renting a small apartment near Was 2, but he often visited Glory's estate for meetings or dinner. Their friendship deepened naturally. They spoke about life, faith, and purpose, about what it meant to be good in a world that often rewarded pride. Sometimes they laughed together late into the evening. Glory found peace in his presence. David found hope in hers. One rainy night, they stood on the balcony of her mansion, watching the storm wash over the city. "Do you ever think about going back?" Glory asked softly. David's expression grew distant. "To Daniel? Sometimes. But I think God wanted me to leave, to learn to stand on my own. Maybe one day I'll see him again, but I don't hold any grudge." "That's rare," she said. "Most people would want revenge." David smiled faintly. "Revenge is a prison. Forgiveness is freedom." Glory looked at him, really looked, and saw not just a man, but a light. Months later, Glory invited him to a business conference in Lagos. She wanted him to meet investors and learn more about entrepreneurship. The trip changed everything. David's intelligence and humility caught the attention of several business leaders. One of them, impressed by his integrity, offered to partner with him on a logistics venture. Glory helped him draft the proposal, provided startup support, and before long, David Okafor and Company. Logistics was born. Under his leadership, the company grew rapidly. Contracts came from banks, hotels, and even government ministries. Within a year, David became a millionaire. Within 2, a billionaire, one known for his honesty, generosity, and faith. Through it all, he never changed. He still prayed daily, still treated everyone, from cleaners to executives, with respect. And every Sunday, he visited orphanages around Abuja, quietly donating food, scholarships, and hope. Glory watched his journey with pride and quiet admiration. Their friendship had deepened into something tender and unspoken. And though neither had confessed it aloud, love was blooming, the kind built not on desire, but on shared strength and grace. One evening, as they walked through the gardens of her estate, Glory turned to him. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "why you fell asleep at my gate that night?" David smiled. Because God knew that sometimes, the road to destiny passes through heartbreak. She smiled back. "And through mercy." They stood in silence, the Abuja sky glowing orange above them. Far away, Daniel's world was beginning to crumble, though neither of them knew it yet. The wheel of fate was turning again. But for now, David's heart was full, not of pride, but of peace. The boy who had been thrown out with nothing now stood as a man with everything: wealth, love, and most importantly, grace. 2 years later, Abuja buzzed with whispers of scandal. Daniel Okafor's company, once the pride of the capital, had collapsed overnight. News headlines screamed of fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal. His business partners vanished with millions, leaving him to face the chaos alone. The banks froze his accounts. His mansion was seized. Even Cynthia, the woman he'd once worshipped, packed her designer bags and disappeared before dawn. Within days, Daniel went from luxury to nothing. He wandered the same streets he'd once sped through in expensive cars, now dressed in worn clothes, his eyes hollow. He tried to call old friends. None picked up. The world had turned its back. And for the first time, he remembered the night he had thrown his brother out. The look in David's eyes. The calm, wounded silence. The words, "Please, brother." Shame tore through him. "I destroyed the only person who ever truly loved me," he whispered, voice trembling. Weeks passed before he found the courage to look for David. He heard rumors of a man named David Okafor, a billionaire known for his integrity and kindness, running one of Abuja's biggest logistics firms. At first, Daniel refused to believe it, but curiosity drove him to find out. When he arrived at the grand gates of Glory Estate, his knees nearly gave way. The mansion standing before him was even larger, more beautiful than the one he'd once owned. The guards stopped him. "You can't enter here," one said firmly. Daniel's voice cracked. "Please, tell him his brother is here." They exchanged uncertain glances. "Which brother?" "David," he whispered. "Tell him. Daniel has come home." Just then, a sleek black SUV rolled through the gate. Inside sat David and Glory, returning from a charity event. When David saw the man at his gate, dirty, broken, trembling, his heart clenched. He stepped out without hesitation. "Daniel!" Daniel dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I was blind, David. I let pride destroy everything. Please forgive me." David knelt beside him and took his hands. His eyes glistened, but his voice was steady and full of grace. "I forgave you," he said softly, "the day you threw me out. Pain made me strong, but love kept me human." Daniel wept openly as David embraced him, the same brother he had cast away now holding him like a child. Glory watched from a distance, tears in her eyes. That evening, David gave Daniel a furnished apartment and a position in his company, not out of pity, but out of love. And as the Abuja sun set behind the hills, two brothers stood together again, not as master and servant, not as rich and poor, but as men reborn through forgiveness. Because in the end, it wasn't wealth that won. It was kindness. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from in the comments below.